regarding working with composers, they were asking, was there an idea for each boss OST theme beforehand, or did you score it as the game developed?
Okay,
Okay,
so
great.
again, the answer was provided by Falk, but we're trying to weave in our own interpretation. So because NSR is like really a music game, right? The gameplay and music goes hand in hand quite a bit, and it was decided very early on that the base versions represent bosses on a personal level. So if you all played the game, you know that there's the base version, there's the rock version, and there's the EDM version, right? And depending on whatever parameters that we'll talk about later, the music will weave in and out of the stems and the genres, right? So when we talk about the bass, for example, for Inu, right, her thing is all about classical music. So when you listen to Inu's track, it's very strong on the piano, very strong on the orchestra. For DJ Galaxy, it's about disco. And then the EDM version would represent the artistry within No Street Rules. Because as you all know, NSR represents the whole EDM empire, right? This is not a spoiler, right? So
It's in the trailer.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's all in the
everybody knows that
trailers.
this game is EDM versus rock, so at least you would have watched the trailer. So yeah, and then the rock would be a representation of Bang Bit Junction, which makes out of Mayday and Zook taking over the music. So in the game you can think about like, oh, okay, there's bass, and then the EDM is meant to assert the dominance of No Straight Roads, and as the players win, then you will start to hear more of the rock stems come through, right? So most of the bosses are like that. There are some exceptions, so we go through those exceptions later. Okay, so because the system's design, the music system design was designed by Falk, by the way, so huge props to him. We needed to have the bass version crafted first. So everything, the EDM and the rock version and whatever other versions, right, will reference from the bass. So your BPM, your key, and it's often like reiterated as the bosses themselves evolve from a gameplay perspective. Does this phase need to be longer? Does it need to be more pronounced at some areas? Does the transition music work from a narrative standpoint? So we also work generally with the concept art as well with an early script. So once the base is set, then EDM and rock can follow quite easily, right? So yeah, that means we don't touch anything else, because like it's music is one of those things like we better lock it early first, right? Then we can do the other layers easier
Especially for
without
this
change.
game.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the benefit of having music first was the sound design could easily reference. Okay, we didn't just have the boss imagery to reference with. We also had the musical theme as well to reference. So it becomes more. I think it was easier to create a more cohesive sound design as well.
Oh, okay. For those that play the game, right, you will realize that you only hear snippets of the layers come in and out. Some of you might be thinking, oh, damn it, I don't get to hear the whole EDM version or the whole bass version or the whole rock version. But ultimately, from a narrative and gameplay standpoint, that weaving in and weaving out work really well for us in terms of giving feedback for the gameplay. But also, anyway, you would be able to unlock these modes. So, you can replay again to play completely in EDM or completely in rock if you want to. And please buy the OST if you really want to listen to it on its own. Just giving a shout out right there. Buy their OST. Okay, so because the stems, right? The stems are separated into rhythm, backing, and melody, right? So it's like 3 genres and 3 layers per genre, right? The music needs to be composed in such a way that there is melodic content and rhythmic content at all times. So at any time within the game, when any of these layers switch around, right, it just seems seamlessly transitions between each other, and there isn't like a naked, empty hole right there. So that's one of the things that the composers needed to take note of, right? And I think for those of you who have used the COI, which is the Circle of Influence sweeteners to activate your props, you will notice that the COI has to be translated across all genres. So it's really cool, like especially if you play 2-player and then you get Zook and Mayday doing the COI together. The second question is, how did the team choose the NS artists subgenres, and did the character design or music genre come first?
Yes,
Let's
I'm gonna
see.
bring it up.
So this is a music centric question as well.
Mm.
So we also reached out to Falk for the answers, and it's very interesting things. And then of course, all like as I mentioned, all these music things will bleed over to sound design. So we'll talk about the music first, then we'll talk about the sound design.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, it was a bit of a emergent development that evolved side by side with the game itself. I mean, because like as we mentioned just now, it's really existing in parallel, you know. So we knew, for example, that we wanted Sayu's first remix to be a vaporwave remix to both fit contextually, because water music. Oops.
Because
Yeah,
Sayu is a boss that is set in the ocean. Yeah. Okay.
It was an inversion of expectation because all the other bosses' EDM versions were generally heavier than the bass version. But because Sayu is special, Sayu, her music genre changes as you destroy her modules. So every time you destroy a module, right, it gets a little bit more muted. So, you know, what we mean is that most other levels, the EDM version is a lot more pumping, right? It's like, oh, very aggressive, maybe it's dubstep. But then for Sayu special, her EDM version is actually really, really chilled out,
Yeah,
right?
because
Because
her bass version
it's
is like super.
subtracting. Yeah. Oh yeah, her bass version is super hyper,
Yeah.
which is drum and bass. So yeah. In that sense, her EDM version is just chills out everything because you're destroying her modules, you're removing part of her. Right? And another example would be Eve, where the team, when they were designing the fight, we knew that the EDM version needed to convey rage. Like Eve is just really, really pissed off at Mayday, which is not present in the base version. The base version is very chill. So dubstep, because you know everybody knows how angry dubstep is, right? Right. It's
Yes.
angry. Yes.
Aggressive.
I would say
Yeah.
aggressive more than
Yes.
anger. I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I wanted to reiterate that the base version needs to be locked in before we even explore all of this, right? And it wasn't changing any cost in terms of structure and timing. So that was the compositional considerations. In terms of sound design, we did have some concepts. So for example, right, when it came to DJ Subatomic's sounds, because it was disco, right? We wanted to make the sounds not sound so modern kind of synth. So we stuck to a lot of the very traditional sawtooth, you know, traditional sine waves and stuff. And even the effects itself, the effects would come from something that you can find in DJ effects pads, like simple delay, simple reverb, you know, even a looper. Like if we wanted to introduce, like, let's say stuttering or like glitches, right? We were going to reserve it for Sayu. So when we were deciding, for example, on the palette of sound design, right, we had to look in the context of all the bosses, right, from DJ sub all the way to CEO, and we wanted to make sure that each level had a very unique identity of sound effects, and even the sound design and also the sound effects. The sound effects meaning the effects that are stacked onto the sounds. Yeah, whether it's a delay or whatnot, a flanger or something. Yeah. So for Sayu, which is Alex's domain, he did a really great job with the sounds. It's all very magical girl. Maybe Alex, you want to talk about it a bit?
Yeah, sure. I'm just thinking which area to start from. I guess when I was first designing it, we saw a lot of like references to Hatsune Miku, and I think there was other things. I didn't know about VTubers or anything like that at the time. I only found out about VTubers like maybe like 3 months ago or something. So most of my research was based around anime Magical Girl
We can go in and
designs.
play some of the Sayu stuff for those that don't know.
Yeah, sure.
She's the digital idol.
I think the most fun
Boss.
parts about designing her
Yes.
was definitely for the transformations, and all her little actions had have a little bit of sound to it. Sort of like similar to those when we talk about Magical Girl. I think when they do every little small action, there's a little bit of sound that accompanies it. You get to